What up, y'all? This is Isaiah coming to you with another episode of the Starts with a Vision podcast. And today is podcast episode 54, right? And I have a good episode for you. I hear this question all the time, or I hear this conversation going on all the time. And I feel like this is a really big question and a big topic in the direct-to-consumer space. And so I want to shed some light, my opinion on it. And so we're really talking about, when should I get a storefront? When should I get a storefront? When should I get a storefront? I want a storefront. And so we're going to talk about it, right? When I think about getting a storefront, I think about everything that it's going to take. And then I also think about how that is completely kind of like on the other side of the coin from direct to consumer. So imagine you have one coin and you have two sides. You have online sales, and then you have in-store sales, because a storefront is in-store, right? And so here's how I look at things. A simple answer, because there's no right or wrong way to think about this, but there is a more efficient way. Any decision you make, you're just going to make, and you're going to deal with, however. But if you want to start thinking about it from a strategical point of view and things like that, I would, number one, ask myself, what does my online performance look like? And also, what am I selling? And also, where do I live at? Because if you live in New York versus, Kentucky, it's going to be a different type of decision that you're going to make, right? But number one is, what do my online sales look like? And here's why I say that. Over time, if you focus on online sales, you will get to the point where your online sales are a bulk of your revenue, over 80-90% of your revenue, if you're just focusing on online sales. Because there's a quote, and it says, wherever your attention goes, the energy flows and it grows. So if you're focusing on online, then that's going to grow. So I want you guys to know, online is the best way to go about selling a product in 2021 and 2022. A storefront is okay, but you have a lot of different things that are against you. A lot of people, when you have a storefront, you got to understand that that's a different shopping experience than online is. So you want to have your online locked and loaded before you get a storefront, because your storefront, the rent on your storefront is going to be X amount of dollars, whatever that is, depending on where you live at. Then you're going to have to house not only the inventory there, but you're going to have to get somebody to man that store. How many employees are you going to have? 1 or 2 or 3 or 4? Are you going to be open 7 days a week? Are you going to be open 5 days a week? What is the use of the store? These are different things that you want to ask yourself, because that's going to dictate when you should, or even if you should. Are you going to be working in the store? If you get a storefront, you shouldn't get a storefront to go work the store, because now you bought yourself a job. The goal is, when I get this storefront, I'm having a team and my employees handle the store. You may be there training and managing, but actually working in the store, like every single day for a shift, that's taking away from you actually being a CEO and working on your business and not in your business. If you get a storefront and then you immediately go to working the store, then you're not a CEO, right? You're not operating as a CEO. You're the CEO, but you're not operating in the capacity that a CEO does, right? But what you can do is, and what I believe that, is a smart move is you either do one or two things. You get a hybrid or you just get a warehouse. Now, if you get a warehouse, here's why it makes sense to get a warehouse before you get a storefront. You get a warehouse because this warehouse is where you house your inventory, so you still have somewhere to house it. And then you can still market your products on the internet and you can still get those sales. And now the warehouse is only being used as a storage facility and a fulfillment center for your products, right? And then I say hybrid, if that warehouse has maybe like a showroom in the front or a space in the front, you can have a pickup option on your website for those that are local. Or if you can, then you could build out a little small in-shopping experience in the front. But you got to think about it from a perspective of getting a storefront. How much is the build out going to cost? Right? How much is the build out going to cost? Sometimes your build out could be 30 grand, 20 grand, right? If you sit here and say, I want to get a storefront, I'm making, let's say you're making $10,000 a month and you're like, I want to get a storefront. I would just say, why not get a warehouse and just double down on online sales? Because here's the thing, in today's day and age, you don't need a storefront to be successful, right? The key word there is need. You may want it, but you don't need it, right? And numerically, over time, your online sales are going to continue to grow because people outside of where you live at are going to find out about your brand and about your company. And they're going to be purchasing your products. So you want it to be where your store is just there if you do get it, but it's not affecting the operating of your company. Honestly, you want your store to be, the expenses of your store to be less than like 8 to 9% of your monthly revenue, right? That's the goal. If you can get it under there, then it's not a horrible thing for you to have a storefront. But if your storefront is generating, 50 to 60% of your revenue, then that's kind of dangerous because now you're depending on that store. See, the thing about this direct to consumer game is you gotta go all in on marketing on the internet. You gotta invest in content. You gotta invest in email. You gotta invest in ways to communicate with your customer, but it's that content, right? Instead of spending $2,300 a month on a storefront, take that same $2,300 and invest that into some online ads and some content for the brand, right? Because the online can take you so much further, right? We're not in 1985 anymore. We're not in 2001 anymore. The internet is such a big player. It's at the point where you don't need to be at a physical place to have a business. You just need an online presence. They got something called digital real estate. It's the same thing, right? If you go and rent out a storefront, that's real estate. But you can get the same type of real estate on the internet. The only difference is you got to work for it. You got to get people to know that you exist. But once you do that, people will be coming to your store from the comfort of their bed. It takes more to get somebody to come to your actual physical location than it takes for them to buy something while they're laying in bed. So why don't you invest in that? Why don't you invest into the system, right? Into the system of getting people to your website. in a myriad of ways, however you want to do that. This is how I think, and this is what I would do. You don't need a store until you're doing millions, unless it makes sense before that. And when I say unless it makes sense, what I mean is unless it is like this just happened. Like this was just a bonus to what you were already doing, right? Let's say you got a storefront. It already had the build out that you wanted. You have, 3 team members and they're already gonna work in the place, et cetera, et cetera. Like if that all flows and works, then cool. Or maybe that's where you're making your product. If you have a product where you're making it and you can produce the product in the back of the store, you're gonna be there already. So if you have something in the front of the store where they can come in and shop, that's fine, because that already is under the same building. But you don't want to have a storefront too early in your business, because that can literally kill your business. It can literally kill it. Or it can make it, right? Or it can make it. But from the perspective of direct to consumer, the internet, if you want to get a storefront, go try out a kiosk, right? Go try out a kiosk. That's a really good way to test it. Because you got to think about it. You have to build your local audience. By you getting a storefront does not mean and does not guarantee that all the people in this area are going to literally come and purchase from you. And also, you want to ask yourself, the product that I have, how many times do people use that product consistently? If your product is like, let's say you're selling, an everyday product, like toilet paper, that's something that people are going to need all the time. So to get a storefront selling something like that, that makes a little bit more sense rather than something that somebody would buy once every 2 years or once a year. Because you want to focus on getting the flow of people in there if you're going to get that storefront really popping and jamming. Otherwise, you're getting it just to be able to say that you got a storefront, right? But this is kind of like one of those things. It's kind of like wholesale. Don't do it for your ego. Don't get a storefront just to say, oh, I have a storefront, I have a store. Like that is nothing. Get a storefront because it was a solid play for your business and for the brand. And it's going to help you get here, and it's going to position you to do X, Y, and Z. But not just because I want a storefront. It's a good look. It sounds good. It makes my ego feel good, and I get to brag about it, right? Don't make ego-driven decisions inside of your business. You can literally scale. Scale. You can get to 10 million a year without a store, right? You can get to 10 million a year without a store. You can get to 5 million a year without a store. You can get to 12 million a year without a store. All you really need, the secret is, and the key is, you need a place where the product can be produced. So honestly, a warehouse is better than a store. Honestly, a warehouse is more important and more of a priority than getting a storefront. And a lot of people don't think that, because they think that if I get a storefront, I'll be making X amount of dollars. But this is still business. You still have to pay to get people to become aware that this store exists. And then the people have to, buy into it to the point where they're willing to come to the store, get up out of their house, drive to the store, and actually shop and spend money, right? Rather than if you have some engaging content, it could come across their timeline, they could click on the website and so conveniently purchase. They're both not easy, but I would put my money on the online side of things. right? And then once you have enough money, you have enough reserves, then you could do the store the way you want to do it. Because the worst thing is you don't want to get a storefront and then you really can't, put the resources into it that you really want to. You want to get a storefront and really be able to do that thing the right way. So just be patient, right? Just be patient. Stay online, stay direct to consumer, stay getting your data up, and allow it to flow. You're going to know when the right time is. But getting a storefront is not always just the thing to do. Especially if you're in a lot of times people think, oh, there's nobody in my city doing this. Sometimes that's not the reason why you should do it, right? Because what is your local market ready for that? These are different things that you have to think about and consider. I'm not saying don't do it, but these are things to think about, consider, because you want to make the odds as most favorable in your city as possible, right? So that's what I got for y'all today, man. That's the podcast. Should I get a storefront? When should I get a storefront? These are things to consider. So be sure to let me know what you think about this. Drop it in the comments, what you think. Hit me up if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Google Play or whatever that case may be. And always remember that everything you do in life, it starts with a vision. Peace.